Now, with this edition of Call Governor Branstad, here's your host, Gary Barrett.
And good evening. Welcome to the Call Governor Branstad program on News Radio 1040 WHO. This is your opportunity to talk to Governor Terry Branstad, your opportunity to give him your ideas, your comments, suggestions, and your questions. And the phone number is available to do that, 284-1040, 1-800-469-4295. And also we have an email box that you can send in your questions, iowaquestions@gmail.com. Governor, welcome to the program again.
Thank you, Gary. It's good to be back. What a beautiful day.
Oh, this is a great day. I understand you did a little traveling today, so.
That's right. Well, we had a special ceremony. This is the sesquicentennial of the bombardment of Fort Sumter, which started the Civil War, and we have the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. And so sons of the Union Army had a special ceremony today. And then we also have a traveling exhibit about Iowa's participation in the Civil War at the historical building. So I attended both of those. And then went down to Osceola Foods, had a tour there, and also we had the groundbreaking for what's going to be the biggest turkey hatchery in the world in Osceola.
That's
so big day.
That's big for the state of Iowa right there in agriculture. And you've got a little bit of a kind of a driver's tan, farmer's tan.
Right.
Kind
Well,
of
I was
going.
out in the sun for that groundbreaking today. It was a beautiful day. It was wonderful to be there in Osceola, and the Secretary of Agriculture, the Lieutenant Governor, it's her hometown, and we were all there, and it was a wonderful event, and I hope we can have a lot more of those in the months and years ahead.
Now, while you were gone from the State House, there were some things that happened today. Probably the most recent thing that happened was the confirmation vote that took place in the Senate. There were a number of your appointees that were approved by the Senate, but Isaiah McGee was rejected 30-20. What was your reaction as you heard the news about that?
Well, I was disappointed. I think Isaiah is a really good guy. He's a minority, and I think that he's the right person to run this Department of Human Rights. I think he got 30 votes. In the United States Senate, you can be confirmed by just a bare majority of the Senate for the United States Supreme Court. But in Iowa, we require 2/3 of the entire Senate. That's 34 votes. And I think one of those votes was a motion to reconsider. So he really needs only 3 more votes. So there has been a motion to reconsider filed. I hope the senators will take another look at this. This was a minority person that I appointed to be to be the director of this agency. I believe he deserves the opportunity to do so, and I hope they will reconsider that.
Did he get caught up in a political fight? It sounded like that some of the talk amongst some Democrats was that he was putting his thumb down on any dissent amongst employees, not allowing them to talk to legislators.
Well, on one hand, we have people in the legislature, in the House, have it in their rules that they don't want state employees lobbying them. And then we have the Senate saying, you have to. So it's really putting people in a real bind. And I think he was just carrying out basically the administration's instructions, and that is from my administration, Department of Management, and the governor's office, that he should be the one to speak for the department, and they should not be having a whole army of staff people lobbying on various issues. Now, the members of the commissions representing the various minority groups and they have every right to speak to legislators, but I think there is a certain amount of people in the legislature that object to a bunch of state employees spending our taxpayers' money lobbying, and yet that's one point of view, and then there's another point of view that says they ought to be doing that. And so I really think it's unfair for Isaiah McGee to be stuck in the middle of that. He's really trying to do his job, and I don't think it's fair. I think he's qualified and certainly deserves the opportunity to serve. So I hope they will reconsider and appreciate the fact that he was really just carrying out his responsibilities.
This is a guy with real world experience too. I mean, he's been
city council. He was a
council.
school teacher, and I think he's got a great background, and I think he has the empathy and understanding that it takes. He is a minority himself, so I'm hopeful. It's a pretty big threshold, 34 votes in the Senate, and we're just a few short of that. So I hope they will take another look at this one. Generally, I want to say I'm appreciative of the way that Senator Branstad handled the confirmation process, and with a couple of exceptions, I was pleased, and he certainly gave us a heads up if he felt there were problems with any of the nominees, and so I think the process for the most part went well. I am really disappointed and hopeful that the Senate will take up the motion to reconsider on Isaiah McGee's appointment to be the director of the Department of Human Rights.
So how do you get those extra votes? How do you think what will happen in the next few days?
Well, I hope to talk to a few of the senators personally, just to express my concern, and I hope other people will as well. Maybe people that are listening tonight, that many people from Waukee that do know Isaiah might want to call and let him know. I talked with some of the. I talked with a Democratic representative that was very supportive of him, who's also a minority person, the other night, and so I'm hopeful that the senators will listen on this issue and recognize that here's a person that's very well qualified, and I think can do a good job, and I don't think he, because he's caught in the bind between those that say we don't want the state employees lobbying and those that want state employees lobbying. I don't think that's his fault, and I certainly don't think he should be denied this opportunity because of it.
Well, and as I initially heard all of this, the thing that it made me wonder about is the fact that in business, and maybe that was part of everyone's thinking, in business, you want to have a chain of command. You want to have you want to have the right message get to legislators and not have it be fragmented amongst 100 or 1,000 or
Exactly.
5,000 people. And that seemed to be what he was trying to do.
Well, and that's exactly what we said. We want this administration to speak with one voice, and so we want the department heads to represent the position of the administration, and that's what he's done. And I feel very bad about this happening because I don't think it's got anything to do with his qualifications. It's got to do with the fact that he was carrying out his assignment, and I hope people will just take another look at that. There is an opportunity to reconsider. It only would take a change of 3 votes for him to be confirmed, and remember, it's 2/3 of the entire Senate. He already has 60%, so we're close, but not quite there yet.
The other thing that happened, of course, in the news today is something else that you did was the vetoes that you have done to the 2-year budgeting bills and to the money for
the 1-year budgeting, actually.
Yes, your request for 2-year budgeting and the indigent defense bill. So talk about that a little bit. The Senate was sort of crowing that they had sent a 1-year transportation budget to you, and thinking, well, we'll get him to sign that.
Well, I guess they wanted a clear message that I meant what I said. I think the reason why I was elected governor is people were not happy with the previous governor and the financial mess he left the state in. They used a lot of one-time money for ongoing expenses. They didn't use sound budgeting practices. In fact, he did this massive across-the-board cut in 2009, and then just a week before leaving office, he did another $84 million reduction, and that was partially the legislature's fault because they left $84 million of unallocated cuts to the governor and said, you do it by December 1. Well, he didn't do it until January 3rd, and then it would have jeopardized public safety and health, and they purposely underfunded the indigent defense program by about $20 million in order to say that they spent less money than they really spent, because they knew that would have to be handled with a supplemental appropriation this year. These are the political games that have been going on in this state for too long and need to stop, and that's the reason why I said when I'm elected governor, we're going to have a biennial budget, we're going to spend less than we take in each year, and we're going to fully fund entitlement programs. We're not going to play these games, the shell games of moving things from one fiscal year to another. So today I got the opportunity, both with the item veto of this one bill that said, Governor, go ahead and do what they did last year, and you transfer money, as opposed to us, the legislature that has the power of the purse, actually coming to an agreement and appropriating the money to fulfill the obligations under this entitlement program to pay indigent defense costs. And then the other bill was the transportation appropriations bill, which I submitted a 2-year budget. The House passed a 2-year budget. The Senate only would go with 1 year, and I think the House sent it to me so I could send a clear signal to the Senate. This is not acceptable. I meant it when I said we're going to have a 2-year budget, and frankly, that's going to give the legislature, it's going to, first of all, the school districts right now still don't know what kind of budget they're going to have for the coming year because the legislature hasn't come to an agreement on that. And we're saying we're going to do a 2-year budget, so we're not going to have to go through this again next year. So it gives stability and predictability, and I think it'll give us sustainability for our budgeting practices for the future.
And Darwin has been waiting for a long time. Hello, Darwin.
Hello.
What's on your mind tonight?
Well, I've got a general comment and a question related to mental health care. I'm a pathologist over in Omaha listening online.
Okay, very good.
Governor, I own a 200-acre farm in southwest Iowa, so I want to thank you for legalizing dove hunting, as I already have a group of hunters ready to buy hunting licenses for when they come to visit my farm in the fall for dove hunting season.
Well, you're welcome.
So I really appreciate that bill, and I appreciate the action that the legislature took on that as well.
Well, as you know, every state bordering Iowa has had dove hunting for some time, so it's kind of long overdue, but I think it's going to be an opportunity, and I'm glad to hear you have friends that are going to be hunting on your farm.
Yes, sir. And as for my question, I was wondering about your upcoming plans to revamp state of Iowa mental health services, and 2 things immediately popped into mind. The first is the federal government debt, which is now in the trillions. And the second is that it seems that too many people are looking to the government to provide mental health services for minor issues, and are therefore blocking those who really need the assistance from receiving the service. And with this in mind, would it be possible to cut the existing cost of state mental health programs from the nearly $1 billion that it currently costs? And what confidence do you have that there will be continued federal funds for these programs with the federal deficit in the trillions?
Well, you make a good point. The federal deficit is of great concern, I think, to everybody today. And, of course, we're not only concerned in terms of mental health, but also Medicaid and many other Medicare, many other programs that are going to have to be addressed. At the state level in Iowa, we still have kind of a county-by-county mental health system, and so the services are not uniform across the state. I've asked our new Director of Human Services, Chuck Palmer, who actually was Director of Human Services for me before, so I asked him to come back as the director. I think he's doing a great job to put together a thoughtful, uniform program to try to deal with mental health and for the state to kind of manage and control those costs more effectively. And he's putting together a strategy which we hope will be approved by the legislature that can be phased in over like a 4-year period. And we do want to look at providing the best services as close to home as possible and make sure that the services that are provided are uniform across the state, which is not the case today.
Darwin?
All right. Well, I just wanted to get your opinion on that, and I look forward to hearing more about your plans for mental health care.
Well, thank you very much. Chuck Palmer is working with it. The House and the Senate also have some interest in this. I'm hopeful that we can begin this, maybe this action on this before the legislature adjourns.
Let's hope so. Let's move on to our next call. Bob is on the phone from Sheffield. Hi, Bob. What's on your mind tonight?
I would just like to ask the governor what his thinking is concerning the bloated bureaucracy of the AEAs. What can be done about that? I mean, it's beyond, as far as I'm concerned, out of control. What's your thinking, Governor?
Well, in the budget that I presented, we do reduce the AEA funding, I think, by about $20 million. So we do make a major reduction. And what I want to do is focus on reducing the administrative costs. There's a lot of administrative costs in the AEAs. I do know that there's important services that they provide for special ed and things like that. We want to make sure those special ed services are delivered, but we think they can be done much more efficiently and by reducing administrative costs significantly there. And in the budget I've submitted, we do make dramatic progress in that during this biennium.
Some of the upper salaries are just, they're in the stratosphere is what they are.
Well, you're right, and you're right. There's a lot of administrative costs that I think can be reduced, and that's the reason why that's an area that we have called for a pretty significant reduction. And still, we believe we can meet the needs of the students that have special ed and other requirements without as much bureaucracy as there presently is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bob, we appreciate your phone call. 284-1040, 1-800-469-4295. Warren's a cell phone caller. Hi, Warren. You're on the Call Governor Branstad program.
Well, good afternoon and good evening, Governor.
Good evening. Thank you for calling, Warren.
I've just got a comment and then a two-part question. First, I want to thank you for your willingness to come on WHO Radio for an hour each month, give Iowans a chance to talk with you.
Well, you're welcome. I enjoy that, and it's an opportunity to have direct conversation with the people of Iowa.
And my two questions is, normally I don't worry too much about lawyers, but I am a little concerned that they've got a 6-week backup on getting lawyers paid for citizens of Iowa that, for whatever reason, need the state to help them. So I was curious, how are the hourly rates determined for the lawyers? Are they negotiated or is it set? And I guess I just was curious how the lawyer, were they contacted, or do they come to the state and get on a registry indicating their willingness to take on those that cannot afford legal representation?
Okay, these attorneys are court-appointed attorneys appointed by a judge to represent somebody who is indigent, who doesn't have the financial resources. This is somebody accused of a criminal offense. And then, and when I was a young lawyer, I was appointed to a few of these cases, so I know what it's like. The courts basically set the reimbursement. Part of these cases are handled by the Iowa Public Defender's Office, and part of them are handled by private attorneys who are appointed by the judges to serve in this capacity. Now, the problem has been created by the action of the legislature last year in 2010. They purposely underfunded the requirements by $20 million. Now, they knew what the estimate would be for the cost for the full year, but they only provided enough money to pay for it for about half the year. This was done to try to disguise the level of spending. So they could say, oh, we spent $20 million less. Well, they didn't. They just pushed the burden into the next year, which required a supplemental appropriation. And now the House and the Senate have both supported this, but in different versions. And there's a bill called Senate File 209 in conference committee now trying to iron out the differences between the two houses. And so what the legislature sent me was a bill that said, oh, Governor, you just transfer money from somewhere else. And this is exactly what got us in trouble, because last year that's the way they handled the budget. They gave Governor Culver the authority to do that for $84 million. And the result we're endangering the public health in both mental health and in corrections. And so I don't want to continue those bad budgeting practices, and that's why I item vetoed that provision and said, I want you to work out the differences and pass an appropriation bill, and it's in conference committee. Hopefully it can be worked out in a matter of days.
Most taxpayers do not understand what 2% allowable growth for schools does not mean that schools will have 2% more money to spend. In fact, 85% of all school allowable growth goes to salaries for teachers or other school personnel through the collective bargaining process. It says when members of the Senate are quoted as saying that schools need more money to cover increased fuel bills and other increasing expenses, they're really offering 85 cents out of every dollar for salary increases. Only 15 cents out of every dollar will ever be made available for schools to cover increasing expenses. And it says, please be a voice to and for Iowa taxpayers and explain how little of school funding actually ends up benefiting Iowa school children.
Well, I think the point is that because of collective bargaining, a good share of the cost a good share of the money that goes to schools does in fact go to salaries. I would point out that schools have gone through kind of a roller coaster the last couple of years. We had the across the board cut. And then last year the legislature purposely underfunded the state's requirement, which actually pushed the burden onto the local property taxpayers. So in the budget that I have presented for the next 2 years, we restore stability and predictability, and the state will meet its obligations. But that also means that school districts need to look at ways they can become more efficient. And I think it's important that we recognize the fact that in many school districts, they're going to have to make tough decisions, and they also use one-time federal money that's not available. And so that means they're going to have to make some difficult personnel decisions as well. And we have an even bigger challenge in state government because my predecessor, before he left office, accepted the union's first demand, and we will have a lot of employees that are not at the top of the pay range getting 15% increases over the next 2 years, which is something we can't afford, and it's going to have to be eaten out of existing budgets. So this is something that I really feel is inappropriate, especially when you consider 84% of state employees are paying nothing towards their health insurance. And I think certainly that's not what most Iowans have to face, and I believe we just need to get things back into a reasonable situation, and that's why I've suggested that I would love to have the opportunity to renegotiate that and get something that where employees would contribute something to their health insurance, and maybe we could do like President Obama's done at the federal level, freeze wages for a couple of years till we get the state back on a solid financial basis.
And we're going back to the phone calls, and Tom from Norwalk on the air with us now. Hi, Tom.
Oh, is this Governor Branstad?
It is.
Oh, hello, Governor.
How are you?
I'm good. I wanted to thank you for all your hard work. You're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
I'm real proud that you're serving the state. My question kind of overlaps Iowa government and federal government. And are you familiar with foreign trade zones?
A little bit, yeah.
Well, I had a report sent to me by a friend that said that the Chinese, the federal government had arranged so that the Chinese could have some land in each state in our country to build little like factories or a little town where they could have workers there actually building Chinese products in. And I was wondering if you're familiar with that, if there's one in Iowa or several in Iowa, or if that's just all a bunch of hogwash. Or
I'm not aware of any in Iowa. I do think, for instance, that the Chinese and some foreign countries do own some area, like some of the port areas, like in Los Angeles and places like that, that might be a free trade zone. But I'm not aware of anything like that in the state of Iowa. And, of course, the trade goes both ways, and we do sell a lot of our agriculture commodities in China as well. And I do know companies like Vermeer Manufacturing sell some of their manufactured products over there as well. So, we are doing all we can to try to compete in this world economy, and we obviously want to make as much products as we can in Iowa and be able to ship it throughout the world.
Thank you very much for your call. We go from one Tom to another Tom. Hi, Tom. You're on WHO Radio.
Good evening. Welcome, Governor. I'm glad to see you back on WHO.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. Appreciate your call.
Well, we've been hearing a lot of these commercials put out that I think mischaracterizes the issue that you laid on the table, and that was to expand the taxes on the casinos, acting like this is a job killer. I've said for years that casinos are shifting their costs to the Iowa taxpayers at an artificially low tax rate, and your proposal takes care of some of that. Would you like to comment in regards to the commercials that are being run against you right now?
Yes, you're exactly right. Actually, my goal is to reduce the corporate income tax. We have the highest top corporate rate in the country at 12%. My goal is to reduce that dramatically, and some of the cost of that would be picked up by a graduated tax on the casinos based on the profits that they're making in the state of Iowa. And as you well know, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio all have a much higher tax rate than we have in Iowa. We also require them to make contributions to charities, and even if we do increase their contributions that they'd have to make under this, and that would all go to reduce taxes for other corporations, we basically are saturated with casinos. There's not going to be a lot of job growth in the gaming industry, but if we reduce the corporate income tax and make Iowa more advantageous for entrepreneurs and startup businesses and companies to locate here, I think we can see significant job growth. So my recommendation actually reduces the corporate income tax, reduces the commercial property tax, and it does increase somewhat the taxes on the casinos, but we have revised it now so that it will be graduated. The bigger ones that have the most profits would pay more, and the smaller ones would be a very modest change.
Well, I appreciate that, and my research says that Iowa has the lowest tax rate of any land-based casino in the country, and this is a cost that's being passed on to the taxpayers, and I appreciated you taking the guts to step up to this monster lobby the casinos have and take this issue on.
Well, thank you very much, and you're exactly right. They have more lobbyists and more money than just about any group, so we're taking on a pretty well-entrenched interest group here. But I just think as a matter of fairness, we need to make Iowa more attractive for business expansion and growth, and the corporate income tax rate at 12% is the highest in the nation. We need to cut that. And there's a great opportunity. Illinois is raising its individual and corporate income tax. If we reduce ours, and I've already sent 700 letters to Illinois companies saying we're reducing our taxes and regulatory burden, we'd like you to consider locating in Iowa. So we're going to try to aggressively work to get this approved before the end of the session. I think it could make a real difference in our endeavor to bring 200,000 more jobs here in the next 5 years.
Yes, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. We appreciate you calling in to the Call Governor Branstad program. 284-1040, 1-800-469-4295. Pat in Des Moines next to talk to Governor Branstad. Good evening.
Well, thank you, Governor, for taking my call.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your service. I live in Des Moines, and I'm near retirement, and I'm worried about my property tax. They're about 2% of the value of my house, and it just seems high to me. I'd like to see it reduced, but I don't know if you have any power over that.
Well, I have a recommendation that would limit how much, at least right now, they can go up 4% a year, and I've suggested they should not be able to go up more than 2% a year, but actually it should be based on the fair market valuation, and right now residential taxes are only supposed to be taxed at 48.5% of market value. So I think you want to make, in other words, they value it, and then they're only supposed to levy it based on that 48.5%. But then that can go up because it's tied to our agriculture system of taxing farmland, and which is based on productivity with a 5-year rolling average, looking at commodity prices. And since the two are tied together, when farm commodity prices were low, it rolled down. Now it's going to roll up, and I'm concerned we'll see an increase for the next foreseeable future for the next 5 or 6 years, and I want to limit that to not. Right now it can go up 4% a year. I want to limit it to no more than 2%.
Well, I'm just afraid it's going to become a burden.
Yeah, well, I have the same concerns you do, and I think we need to take action. That's why I've asked the legislature this year not only to address the commercial property tax, but also put the limit on residential and agriculture as well.
Well, we appreciate your phone call, Pat. We've had Jeff waiting with a cell phone call for a while. Hi, Jeff.
Yes, hi, Governor. Thank you for taking my call. I have actually two questions for you.
Okay.
The first one is regarding pro-life. I'm very pro-life, and I recall that you have promised to veto any funding regarding Planned Parenthood, and I was wondering, well, will you carry out that promise?
Yes. Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, I think it would be wrong for the taxpayers of Iowa with the financial problems facing the state to be funding Planned Parenthood. And also there's a lot of concern about Planned Parenthood actually performing abortions without actually having the patient examined by a physician. And that's being done over the air and not in person. And there's a lot of question of whether that's really appropriate under our present law. So, and there's also a piece of legislation which has passed the House that hopefully will pass the Senate as well, which would restrict, prevent late-term abortions. You have an abortion doctor from Omaha, the state of Nebraska passed a law preventing him from doing it in Nebraska, and now he wants to move to Council Bluffs and perform late-term abortions, and hopefully the Senate will approve the House-passed bill, and prevent this from happening in our state.
From, or Fred, I should say, from Collins, Iowa. And pretty simple question, ask you to evaluate the legislature to this point.
Well, I'd say incomplete. I think you need to wait until the session's over before you try to evaluate the legislature. There's a lot to be done yet, and but in most legislative sessions, things end up getting done at the end of the session. So we're going to reserve judgment until the end of the session. I want to work with them. I hope we can accomplish a lot. We want to focus on jobs, the new Partnership for Economic Progress, reducing the commercial property tax and the corporate income tax, and passing a biennial budget that spends less than we take in each year for this biennium. If we get all that accomplished, I'll feel it's a very successful session.
Okay, thank you very much for that email. And back to the phones, and we will talk to John in Burlington. Hi, John.
Hey, Governor Branstad, and thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome, John.
I have a question. I don't know. I guess I'll just shoot with it here. I'm from Burlington, Iowa. Fort Madison, they're building a new state penitentiary.
Right.
And it's the way I understand it, it's a $120 million job.
Right.
I went down there nosing around looking for work, and I've always been non-union, and when they put the addition on the old prison, the 250 units, I did a lot of concrete contract work down there for them, and find out that this job is a union card-carrying job only, and we got a contractor out of Chicago, the way I understand it, and I just kind of wonder how in a right-to-work state we end up with a closed shop job, $120 million.
It's absolutely wrong, and it was done by my predecessor, and I have already signed an executive order to change that. What he did, and I think it is absolutely inappropriate, he signed an executive order for project labor agreements that said these large projects would have to be under project labor agreements, which meant they wouldn't go to big. And frankly, the contractor got that is from Chicago, and a lot of the union jobs are from out of state, and it's going to drive the costs up for Iowa, and it cuts people like you who are non-union contractors out. I think it's outrageous and wrong. I campaigned against that, and as soon as I got to be governor, in fact, the very first day I was in office, I signed an executive order to prohibit future project labor agreements. But this one was already in place before I took office, so I couldn't prevent it, but we will not let this happen in the future.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. I figured it all happened before you got there, and I'm very happy with the things you're doing. Just being fiscally responsible. Thank you for it. And it takes a lot of effort, I know, and perseverance to do these things. But that answers my question, and I thank you very much.
Thanks for your call, and I just think it was very unfortunate and unfair that this was done, and obviously we're going to prevent this from happening in the future.
Next call is Pat. Hi, Pat.
Hi.
You're on with Governor Branstad. Go right ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the program. I'm wondering, when you're looking at budget cuts and things, if you have looked at the programs such as the State Training School in Eldora and any other problems similar to that, how effective are they, the recidivity rate? We had a chance to go up and view that program firsthand and was just appalled by what we saw going on up there as far as even the amount of minorities that are there versus Caucasian kids and the types. And from what we understood, that program is not effective, but they just keep it going. It keeps Eldora going, and they had all these other reasons why it needed to be in place. But looking at the effectiveness, the philosophy probably needs to change and things like that. Have you looked at any of those areas for cost savings and for just revamping?
We've asked each of the new department heads, and this would be, I think, under the Department of Human Services, Chuck Palmer, to review all of these institutions and all of the programs and see what ones are cost effective and what ones are getting the best results. I can also tell you there are some other programs that have, in addition to the State Training School at Eldora, there is an academy at Woodward, and there's also one now in Clarinda that I think have been somewhat effective. And I think we need to look at those programs as well as I would also say probably the ones that are being sent to Eldora are some of the kids that have the bigger problems, that have gotten into juvenile crime and things like that. So they may be dealing with a more difficult situation than some of the other. But we do need to evaluate that, and I've asked the department heads to review all of the programs and look at what is the most cost effective.
Yeah, because I mean, if it may not cost as much, but if they're not effective, then it costs way too much.
Exactly, and we need to look at what works.
Right.
And a lot of times, with the right discipline and management, you can help turn a kid around that might be headed in the wrong direction. And obviously, that's what we want to do. And if you can do that as a juvenile, they don't become an adult criminal. We're all better off.
We appreciate your phone call, Pat, and we appreciate everybody that's called in and participated in this program. And as always, the time disappears quicker than you want it to.
That's exactly right. But thank you, Gary. You're a great host, and appreciate the opportunity to do this. And I look forward to being back next month.
So next time when we talk, hopefully the legislature will be done.
Well, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
We'll keep our fingers crossed and hope.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for taking part in the Call Governor Branstad program on News Radio 1040 WHO.